安心して自分たちこんな身内からこんな扱いを受けて本当に解散なんだな。
そこに多分5万人以上の方がいて、全部が自分のことを攻撃してくるだろうと。
Toshi is not the right center of mind. We even talked to the engineer to turn the microphone down, something like that.
何度も起こそうとしましたが、彼は眠ったままです。
A band's last performance is always something to look forward to. Well, the year is 1997. The band's name is X Japan, and on New Year's Eve was their last concert, the last live, one which sold out in 3 minutes and lasted for about more than 3 hours. With about 50,000 fans in attendance, they were all about to witness one of the greatest live performances in history. To see what was so important about the last live and the tragedy that occurred afterwards, we would have to go back a couple of years to understand the deeply rooted history of Visual Kei and the band that took the hearts of many Japanese audiences. But before that, Japan's music in the 80s was a unique blend of the electronic Yellow Magic Orchestra, the heavy rock and roll of Bowie, and many such other bands. But back in the 80s, Japan was captivated by a movement known as Visual Kei, a mixture of metal and exotic outfits. And one of the most prominent bands in this movement, heck, the one that started it all, was X. The band was originally formed by Toshi and Yoshiki back when they were just teenagers. In their early stages, their lineup was a bit shaky, often consisting band members who would not last long. Even then, the band would still play at venues, performing gigs at small live houses in 1985. They would also release their first single, I'll Kill You, on Dada Records. At this point, the band had their speed and thrash metal sound, along with Toshi's soaring tenor voice and Yoshiki's fast as fuck drums. Eventually, Yoshiki would see a new bassist named Taiji on stage and wanted to recruit him for X as their new bassist, since Taiji was one of the greatest at that time, evolving the band's sound with his tapping and slap bass techniques. At first, Taiji would not want to join X due to musical differences, but for a short while, he would join the band. After recruiting Taiji for bass, he would also find a new guitarist named Pata, who had seen Yoshiki back in a high school competition, Pata bearing his iconic vintage Les Pauls. After Yoshiki found Taiji and Pata, he would also be the leader of the group, as he would handle most of the band's decisions. And he would later on create their record label named the Ecstasy Records. And with this, they would release their second single, their songs noticeably getting more thrashier and having more guitar solos. And after some juggling of band members, Taiji would rejoin the band. But Yoshiki was still looking for a second guitarist, one which would change the band forever. Hideto Matsumoto, also known as Hide, was the leader of the band Saber Tiger and was the guitarist Yoshiki had been looking for all this time, even saying that there would be no other guitarist better than Hide himself. with his iconic Mockingbird guitars, his aggressive punk vocals, and his hypnotizing stage movements. There was also that one time that Hide was eating raw meat while playing guitar on stage, which definitely made Yoshiki love him even more. Suffice to say, Hide was definitely one of the greatest guitarists at that time. Hide's bandmates also told him that Yoshiki had been keeping an eye on him. After some time though, Saber Tiger would disband and Hide would be left alone. Hide would call Yoshiki and they would meet up later at a rehearsal studio. And Hide would tell Yoshiki if X was still looking for a new guitarist, which surprised Yoshiki and the other members of X, as Hide actually wanted to join their band. And of course, they would accept, creating their lineup with Taiji on bass, Pata and Hide on guitars, Yoshiki on drums and piano, and Toshi on vocals. And with this lineup, on April 14, 1988, they would release their debut studio album, Vanishing Vision. And finally, their sound would be solidified, with notable songs such as Kurenai, I'll Kill You, and Unfinished, with Kurenai becoming one of their most iconic songs, featuring a sinister guitar intro, twin guitar solos, and an epic drum break. Although this version was entirely in English, this whole album featuring more solid performances from each of the members. But although this album contained the heavy metal we love in X Japan, it also has a ballad, a song called Unfinished, which would evolve their music later on when they would release one of their most important albums to date. One of their most iconic albums, pure unadulterated visual kei emanating from its cover, with songs like Endless Rain, X, Rose of Pain, and Weekend. Reworks of songs like Orgasm, Unfinished, and Kurenai were also in the album. Blue Blood would feature most of what X Japan is known for. Ballads, heavy metal, speed metal. It's the GOAT! The album would also feature more of the band's symphonic elements, and Yoshiki's drums sound fucking heavy. Endless Rain would also become one of the band's most iconic ballads, and the first one that was ever written by Yoshiki, featuring a tear-jerking vocal performance by Toshi. And a stunning double guitar solo by Pata and Hide. With the release of Blue Blood, it reached number 6 on the Oricon chart and stayed there for more than 100 weeks. And since then, Blue Blood would remain legendary in the movement of visual kei. At this point, the band was at an all-time high. Yoshiki's Ecstasy Records holding summits for bands that were signed to him, especially Lunacy, who were also pioneers for the visual kei movement. X Japan would also go on tour to promote Blue Blood before the release of their next album. In 1990, the band would go to Los Angeles to start recording Jealousy. And this would also be the start of their problems. Jealousy would debut at number 1 on the Oricon chart, with the album sounding more polished and having a better mix than their previous records. Jealousy would also have the most contributions from each of the band members, with songs such as Say Anything, Voiceless Screaming, Joker, and Silent Jealousy. With more melodic guitar solos by Pata and Hide. With Jealousy having the most symphonic elements from any ex-Japan album, Say Anything also being another iconic ballad. Jealousy would also be the last album they would release under the name of X, since later on they would change it to X Japan due to a name clash with another band. In support of Jealousy, the band would play at venues like Budokan, but one of their most iconic locations for live performances would be the Tokyo Dome, where they would also perform their iconic New Year's Eve concerts, which all sold out. And while this was spectacular for the band, what would come next would be a detriment to their legacy. Taiji was one of the best, if not the greatest bassist at that time. Having a sense of melody and songwriting, Taiji was an important aspect to the music of X, which is the reason why Taiji did not like Yoshiki. Both of them having different musical tastes, and Yoshiki also being the leader of the band, which caused a lot of friction between the two, which is why in 1992, Taiji was not in X anymore. There are multiple reasons online as to why Taiji had left the band, one which says that Yoshiki had fired Taiji due to breaking a rule of the band, or due to the financial gap between Yoshiki and Taiji. Whichever one you believe or may believe, Taiji was not part of X anymore, with his last concert being in 1992. At this point, the band was back at it again, having to conceive a new member change after years of a solid lineup. Around the same time that Taiji was fired, Hide already had in mind a new bassist. Back during their Budokan concert, Hide had met Heath, who was also known back then as a heavy metal bassist. And in 1992, Hide had invited him to join X after Yoshiki held an audition for a new bass player, in which he was immediately recruited into the band. You might say that Taiji was better than Heath, but later on he would also write some catchy bass lines for their future projects. And with this new lineup, a new era of X Japan would begin. At the start of 1993, each of the members would also begin their solo careers, which had set the band into hibernation for some time. But on May 1993, they would release a song that would change their sound once again. Art of Life is perhaps X Japan's magnum opus in songwriting. It is a 30-minute song with full English lyrics and is told like an epic story. It also has the most guitar solos I've ever heard on an X Japan song. And the roller coaster of a piano solo. Originally, the song was supposed to be released on Jealousy, but due to Yoshiki's perfectionism and another reason that we will tackle on later, it was delayed. The song was recorded with a real orchestra and features free movements through its entirety. The song's lyrics, which were also written by Yoshiki, were also very dark, talking about experiences from back when he was younger, when his father had committed. I'm not gonna go into more of the details because I want you to listen to the song itself, preferably with a couple of beers, because this is a fucking life-changing song. Art of Life would also top the Oricon chart once more. And it's also the first song to feature Heath as their new bassist, which is fucking insane. The band would perform the song live a couple of times, especially during their New Year's Eve concerts at the Tokyo Dome. I'm gonna keep saying that throughout this whole fucking video. After the release of Art of Life, the band's activities would again be barren, only releasing a few singles and maybe some concerts along the way. Around this time would also be the uprising of Marisumiza, which would be a band that would pioneer the second movement of Visual Kei. I might talk about this epic concert and the band as well in the future, but let's go back to X Japan. Eventually, in 1995, they would also start dropping their Visual Kei aesthetic, instead opting for a more casual rock look, while Hide would not be so casual. And they would also start a tour for their next album, which would release in 1996. And this would be X Japan's last album. This album was very divisive in terms of the band's sound, with most of the songs from Dahlia being singles the band had already released. With only 4 new songs from the band. Even then, this is still my favorite X Japan album, with the band experimenting new genres, especially Hide, who had already played some industrial and alternative rock before in his solo career. Dahlia also contains the most hits from any X Japan album, with songs such as Rusty Nail, Dahlia, Forever Love, Tears, Longing, Crucify My Love, Scars, and Drain, which was a song that Hide would later use for his own band. I'm not kidding when I'm saying this is a greatest hits album, cause it pretty much fucking is. Dahlia would also contain the most ballads, such as Tears, while some other songs would lean into alternative rock and sometimes a mix of the band's previous metal. There's a reason this is my favorite album, since it contains my favorite instrumentation of the band, mostly coming from the song Dahlia, which features a lot of exotic sounds made by Hide's guitar. And the obligatory slow symphonic section that Yoshiki always writes in this era. I also love this album because when have you ever expected X Japan to go to industrial rock and do it so fucking well? After the release of Dahlia, it again topped the Oricon chart, with most people generally praising it for its experimental nature and amazing songwriting. And it would also remain as one of X Japan's greatest albums. After the release of Dahlia, Japan would continue their Dahlia tour in support of the album, although they would perform less compared to their earlier years, mostly opting to play their iconic New Year's Eve concerts at the Tokyo Dome. And with this, the lineup of X solidified over time with Heath on bass, Ata and Hide on guitars, Yoshiki on drums and piano, and Toshi on vocals. As legendary as this lineup is, the band would still have their problems. Yoshiki's leadership style would often clash with the band's creative decisions, leading to tensions within band members. Yoshiki and Toshi also had their share of disagreements, both musical and personal. A great example is the creation of Art of Life.
We are doing the song Art of Life, which is like 30 minutes long song and then it's all English. We kept recording. That vocal tracking took like, I think over a year. Just vocal tracking itself.
当時はやっぱり要求してくる YOSHIKI に対して怒りを感じたり反発したりしていましたね。
In the end, making one of Japan's greatest songs. Even then, the members had already made their solo careers, most notably Hide with his band Zilch and his solo work. Yet, Japan was still making music and performing live, which would end the Dahlia tour at New Year's Eve in 1996, when in September 22, 1997, this would happen.
一緒に続けてきたメンバーであり友人でもあった彼らの脱退は、僕にとってもかなり辛いことでした。
I didn't want to do that show, but he convinced me to do it.
On September 22, 1997, 4 of the members of Japan held a press conference announcing that they would be disbanding. It was mentioned by Yoshiki that Toshi had wanted to leave the band due to the lifestyle not being able to fulfill him emotionally. This was announced back in 1996, but the band had kept it secret. Another part of this was Toshi's involvement with a cult named Home of Heart.
ボーカリストとしてもうやっていけないんじゃないか。当時悩んでいた自分に、そのある女性がそこに僕を引き入れようと、当時は偶然のように出会って内面を意図的にすり替えられていくというか、彼らの言い分からすれば悪魔のような存在が x ジャパンなんだと。だから自分は改心していく、そういう生き方をするんだということを刷り込まれていました。
But this information was kept secret until years later. Although the band had felt like a family for the past decade, at that time, we were at the verge of internally self-destructing. They would announce their last show on New Year's Eve, promptly titled The Last Live, and they would perform it at the Tokyo Dome. For a lot of Japanese fans, the breakup of Japan was certainly heartbreaking, considering that most of their fans had a very deep emotional connection with the band. And to see it all go in one last show was frightening. And on December 31, 1997, The Last Live would begin.
でもどうして解散になったと思います？海の。トシ君がな、ヨシキの間がな、気まずくなったからだろ？トシのせい？トシのせい？
At this point, the band had already finished their rehearsals, with most of them not even speaking to each other. Toshi is most definitely the one under all of the pressure, with the fans' backlash against his decision and the cult who was most definitely watching the live performance on broadcast. We start with a shot of the Tokyo Dome in all of its glory. The lights darken and the audience erupt erupts with screams. The stage lights up as we see what fans would experience as their last memory of ex-Japan. The song Amethyst starts playing as the audience is eagerly waiting for the members to appear. Amethyst was actually a song released on Yoshiki's solo album back in 1993 and was later used in some live performances for ex-Japan shows. For me, the song sets an immediate tone for the rest of the show, entailing a sort of magical but tragic tale for the band. The lights flash brightly as Yoshiki is first seen at the middle of the stage, as the other members are soon revealed. A mixture of emotions are seen from each of the members. You could see Hide was trying to be the most cheerful. As each member walks the center stage, the fans are as loud as they can get, and later on, this would not dwindle at all. As Amethyst keeps playing on, a message is played to the audience.
Welcome to our Tokyo Dome show, the last live. Memorize this night we will spend together and keep us in your hearts. We would like to introduce the members. On vocals, Toshi. On bass, Heath. On guitar, Hata. On guitar, Hide. And on drums and piano, Yoshiki. Introducing ex-Japan, Japan, 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 Japan.
This is just speculation, but I think Toshi, hearing the crowd shout so loud as his name is said, might just remind him that the fans do actually still love him. The crowd roars as the first notes of Rusty Nail begin, and like clockwork, the band goes back to being ex-Japan. Throughout the song, you could also see that Toshi has shed a tear. The band's playing is absolutely fucking solid, and later on, Hide would also play one of the greatest guitar solos. I fucking love Hide, man. Also, throughout the show, the whole fucking stage design, the lighting, it's also mesmerizing. Rusty Nail comes to an end and Toshi takes the mic. I think that each of us feels a lot of different emotions and a lot of different feelings. The day these feelings are going to erupt. I also think that when Yoshiki interrupted Toshi, that it was to stop him from saying anything too rash. Maybe to move on to the next song, Weekend, which would feature a different composition than the original song, showcasing a more dramatic intro with Toshi's vocals rather than the guitar intro. The song also being a half step higher than the original key. The guitar solo is also a bit different, mostly Pata who plays another version of his solo. This version of Weekend would also fall victim to Yoshiki's symphonic break. But what I truly love about this version after that, the song ends like normal, with the stage going back into darkness, with only some of the stage set being seen and Hide's glow-in-the-dark Fernandez, with the live intro of Scars being played, with vocals from Hide and Toshi hauntingly in the background. After the intro, the band goes into Scars, featuring amazing guitar work and Toshi's distorted vocals. Overall, Scars emanates more of ex-Japan's experimental rock, being primarily written by Hide, with him also playing a very shreddy guitar solo ran through his wah pedal. After the solo is also a very funky bass line by Heath. The outro features Hide's guitar once again, and the song ends. The band goes into another break as Toshi takes the mic, but before Toshi was able to speak, he is hit by emotion. Perhaps once again due to the totality of the situation. He can't bear to face the crowd. But in spite of this, on the side, Hide says some words of encouragement, leading to Toshi bearing a smile once again. This also hits harder since Hide was actually the only one who contacted Toshi when the band was at stake. Are you all okay? Let's have no regrets. Let's finish in beauty. Show us your real character. I've already spoken about Dahlia in great length, so I'ma just add some details. One of which is this part in the middle, which I love so much. Purely instrumental, but all of the band are playing so tight, with the quiet part featuring the band in a very tight shuffle, then suddenly going into the loud, almost murderous sounds created by Hide's guitar. After this part, Toshi had began interacting with Yoshiki more behind the drum set, and after a heightened performance, the song Dahlia ends, and we go back to a familiar sight. Yoshiki begins breaking his drums to the point where the audio has been fucked, even falling over at one point. As Yoshiki leaves the stage, the audience grows more in anticipation as red lights are seen throughout the stage. No, it's not Kurenai. It's Drain, another side of industrial rock by ex-Japan, which was primarily written by Hide. Again, also featuring some gnarly bass guitar by Heath and some industrial-ass drums. Drain sounding very dystopian and dark, supported by Hide's almost black metal-esque vocals. The song comes to an end on a high note as the audience erupts with more screams. The stage covered in darkness as Yoshiki steps up to his piano. The crowd is louder once again, and Yoshiki takes his piano solo. And I'll take this moment to talk about just how fucking amazing Yoshiki is as a musician. Being able to play drums and piano at a high level, and to also write songs at that capacity is just absolutely daunting. The piano solo is heightened as Yoshiki begins smashing the keys and the stage turns a bright red. And after a few more minutes, Yoshiki calms down as Toshi enters the stage and begins singing "Crucify My Love." Another ballad from Dahlia, although this time played at a different key. You can also see that Toshi has removed his shades and covered in white garments. And after that very emotional performance, you could also see that Yoshiki had actually bled from one of his monitors, and Toshi takes the mic once again. As all of you always supported us since X's creation, I really wanted to tell you thanks a lot. Yoshiki begins playing the intro for Longing. I think at this point in the concert was where the band had already realized that they were actually breaking up. As the band goes into Longing Togireta melody, also a ballad from Dahlia, carrying a melancholic presence as well as some bravado. At this part in the concert is also where you can see some of the band's very distant stares. The entirety of the Tokyo Dome also covered in these beautiful spotlights, as the song ends on a rather surprising note. And after those two hauntingly beautiful ballads comes another hauntingly sinister guitar intro. As the stage is covered in crimson red, and for a little backstory, I would have never gotten into X Japan without this specific performance of Kurenai. With Hide's dead-eyed stare as he plays one of the most epic guitar intros, guitar pick on his lips as Toshi sits beside him. As Toshi is singing, Hide gives slight glances to his figure, and as the intro comes to an end, for the band, this song was their heart and soul, and to play it for one last time meant it would be one of their greatest performances. As the stage is covered in even more crimson red. I don't need to talk about this song anymore, but I'll show you some of the cool moments. As the song ends, the band does not stop with its momentum, as the band goes into an 18-minute version of Orgasm, with the band going into shenanigans in the middle of it. Honestly, there's so much shit they've done in the middle of Orgasm that I'll just put the compilation here. Yes, I know the title of the song makes this sound weird. I think the best part is when Hide starts doing push-ups and then the next time Hide and Toshi start doing them as well. Actually no, because Yoshiki brings out a fucking fire extinguisher and blasts the crowd with it, with security trying to protect him. And after some of the craziest shit that ever happened on the Tokyo Dome, they go back to complete Orgasm, with Pata shredding on his Les Paul. And as the song ends, the band goes backstage, with Yoshiki throwing some drumsticks to the audience. And as the band takes their break, we're given shots of the audience. We see some of them creating waves, some throwing objects in the air, and some chanting the band's members. These shots are pretty awesome, as you can see even in the last performance of X Japan, a lot of people are here for different reasons. But as the audience waits, they all start chanting slowly and slowly the chorus, The Endless Rain. Growing louder and louder as minutes go on. But after some time, a sound is heard. I don't know what caused it. It could have probably been a prop or something else that dropped, but whatever it was, it caught the attention of the audience, as more of them stand up thinking the band is gonna come back. And sooner or later, the lights would dim, but the band would be nowhere at sight. And as the audience eagerly waits, we come into the second part of the concert. As Yoshiki is revealed by blue spotlights, He sits on his drums while Serenade for Strings in C by Tchaikovsky plays in the background. And to add a little bit of backstory, this was the second drum solo I ever watched of Yoshiki, with the first one being a different performance in 1993. And actually, both of these performances are what led to me playing the drums even more. I'm not gonna show you most of the drum solo because I want you to watch it, okay? Because Yoshiki is also an amazing fucking drummer. After the drum solo, the stage is covered in smoke as Yoshiki lays on the ground. And in the background, almost like a lullaby, Toshi begins singing the opening verse to Forever Love as Yoshiki sits far away from Toshi. And as the chorus begins, he too stands up and starts walking towards Toshi. And when Toshi sings the last part of the chorus, this happens. After that, Yoshiki sits on his piano and the band starts playing Forever Love. As they begin with their guitar solo, Hide also begins to shed tears. And later on, Yoshiki would also begin to break down. And after the song ends, Yoshiki checks up on Hide to see if he was okay. And as the band goes backstage once again, we cut to some shots of the audience members, with most of them wiping their face due to the tears. And as the set moves, the song Prologue begins to play, with the band coming out optimistically, with Hide and Yoshiki coming from the right and the rest of the band coming from the left side. And a new announcer begins to speak. As they play one of their last metal songs for the concert, X. Another staple song for the band in each of their concerts, with the song's iconic chants during its chorus. Some epic guitar solos by Pata and Hide. And perhaps the most iconic part of X is when Toshi does this. The song ends explosively as the audience goes into a frenzy, as the band gives a more distraught look compared to their joyous selves earlier, since their next song would be the most important for this concert. But before that, Toshi and Yoshiki would give their last MCs. We're all friends, having the same pain, the same wounds, the same sadness, wishing to pass it all through our music. This band's name is X Japan. Yoshiki founded X. Since we had no ideas, we all chose it. X was our mark, like everything was possible. Each one of us will forever be the same. It's really beautiful. We don't need to become someone else. We don't need to learn to be someone else. Each one of you made this band what it is today. We really thank you a lot. It's well said. A lot of things happened, but from now, I am sure that Toshi is a real friend. And I have a lot of respect for Hide, Pata, and Heath. Thank you. And as the band sits on a standstill, Yoshiki begins playing the first opening notes of Endless Rain. For a lot of the fans, this was their most awaited moment, even earlier chanting the song's chorus at their break. It too is my favorite ballad from the band, and I think it goes without saying that even though this song is a concert staple, this was their last and most special performance of Endless Rain. I've said before that the performance of Kurenai earlier was my introduction to X-Japan, but this is what definitely hooked me on to the band. The first time I watched this performance, I was definitely in a lot of tears, even for a band that I had no knowledge of. Just to see the performance and all of the emotion behind it was just absolutely mind-blowing. Also, this shot of Toshi looking at Hide, and after the guitar solo, per tradition, the band stops as Yoshiki remains to play the piano as the crowd sings along with the chorus. And after a minute, Yoshiki stops playing as he lets the crowd go on with the song. With shots of the band members distantly staring, pondering at the end of their once beloved band. But to also think of the amount of love that these fans have had for them for the past decade. Yoshiki begins playing the piano and Toshi follows along once again. And after one last chorus, Toshi stops singing and Yoshiki begins to stop playing as well. Hide begins leaving the stage as Pata follows along. Heath and Toshi also begin leaving, with only Yoshiki remaining, as he too begins leaving the stage. As the audience continues singing, Sparkling Disco Ball being the only remnant of the set. And after a while, the concert ends. Or not, because in the original last live video set, it ended on Endless Rain, but in future releases, that was not the case. As the lights from the disco ball disappear, the song Say Anything begins to play, with the crowd singing along, as the stage erupts with confetti, but not only that, with the band giving gifts to the audience. And as Say Anything fades away, all of the band comes to center stage. And after that very heartwarming gesture, the band goes into position as Toshi brings one last speech before their last song is played. The last song, which was written primarily just for the last live. The song sounds heavenly. It's almost like the band is telling us that it's all gonna be okay, but that we have to fight in the end. As Yoshiki words out the intro, a very emotional Toshi begins singing. as Hide and Pata played their last double guitar solo together. With tears running down Hide's cheeks, the song builds with its quiet verses and its loud choruses, and as the song goes on, Toshi begins singing the last chorus. As Yoshiki is the last one playing, and after a few more minutes, Toshi sets down the mic, with all the other members signifying to each other that X-Japan has truly ended. Hide and Pata begin removing their guitars, and as a few more minutes go by, Toshi begins to leave the stage for the last time. The next to stand up is Hide, who goes in the same direction, with the next being Pata and soon Heath. And after a while, Hide and Toshi both leave in the same direction, while Pata and Heath go in the opposite way, saying goodbye to the fans as they move along, with only Yoshiki left in the middle. And as he plays the last note, he stands up, takes a bow, and begins leaving the stage. And this is truly the end of X-Japan. After all of the members had left, footage from the band's earlier years begin to play as Tears is in the background, showing most of their tours from Blue Blood up until Dahlia, even including Taiji in some of the footage, as well as shots from earlier in the last live. For one last time, the stage erupts with pyro, and it ends with a message from the band, roughly translating to, "Thank you for supporting us for a long time. We are sincerely grateful." December 31, 1997, from all the members of X-Japan. The song Unfinished is also being played in the background as shots of fans are shown to us, some crying, some devastated, and some are just staring into the void. As for them, this is truly the last time X-Japan would perform, and this performance would end a great era of Visual Kei. But unfortunately, it would also be the last performance of a member. After the last live, most of the members pursued their own projects, with Toshi continuing his already extensive solo career. Pata and Heath teamed up to help with Ina from Hide's group Spread Beaver and their upcoming album to provide one song. Yoshiki had collaborated with many foreign and Japanese artists in his time, with ones such as Roger Taylor from Queen, and a supergroup duo named V2. Hide would return to his solo career with Spread Beaver, performing on NHK and many other concert venues. And his new band Zilch. But unfortunately, this would be his last days before his death. On May 2, 1998, Hide had died due to an appearance, with his death spawning multiple copycats. to occur and causing mass hysteria among fans. During his wake and funeral, multiple stampedes and crowds would cause casualties, with the latter taking place when the year was the hottest. Multiple friends and acquaintances from Hide's life had attended his funeral, with the remaining members of X-Japan also being there for him. They would also perform Forever Love in front of his casket and his many guitars. Hide's death has been told in many perspectives, one of which is the alleged, while the other being an accident. But this is another rabbit hole for another day. In the grand scheme of things, Hide's death was one of the most tragic events to occur for the people of Japan and for Japanese music as a whole, marking it as an end to a great era of visual kei. X-Japan has since reunited in 2007, releasing new singles and even recruiting Sugizo from Lunacy as lead guitarist, while still keeping Hide in their hearts. And a few years later, they would also reunite with Taiji for a one-off concert with him. But unfortunately, a year later, he would be arrested at an airport where he would spend time in jail, which also led to his another tragic loss, as one of X-Japan's greatest bassists is no longer with them. Taiji's death has also spurred numerous controversies regarding the way he died, but again, that's another rabbit hole. X-Japan would also see themselves releasing a 6th album, with songs like Jade and IV being teased as part of it. But up to this date, it hasn't been released yet. The band would also release a film documentary about the life of X-Japan and also Yoshiki's. After 2017, X-Japan would continue performing concerts and releasing very few singles, the latest one being Angel in 2023, where unfortunately another member of X-Japan would pass away, Heath, who had died after being diagnosed with a cancer that he did not see until it was too late. Heath's death has also caused a great sadness within the Japanese community as well as X-Japan, holding his funeral a few months later. And after Heath's death, X-Japan to this day is seen without any activities. The Last Live perfectly encapsulates the story of X-Japan, one of ambition, greatness, and unfortunately tragedy, formed by Yoshiki as a form of escapism from his father's untimely death, soon defying song and album conventions, releasing Blue Blood and Art of Life, which had merged symphony and metal in a harmonious way, and creating the visual kei movement with her outfits and demeanor that still lasts to this day. We owe a lot to X-Japan, influencing bands like Der and Grey, Versailles, and many other bands, with Marty Friedman from Megadeth even saying that X-Japan was the reason he got into Japanese rock music. If X-Japan was just dealt better cards, they would most definitely be one of the biggest rock bands in the world. But for me personally, The Last Live was the end for X-Japan, as the tragic death of Hide and the turmoil between the band had caused them an everlasting pain, one which had seeped through the hearts of many Japanese people. And with that, the story of X-Japan ends.
Mountain town in mid-July, she's laying on his arm.